The gate agent's hand came down hard on the counter, the sound sharp enough to cut through the terminal noise. "Step back, now!" The words weren't loud, but they carried authority, the kind that didn't expect resistance. A ripple went through the people waiting nearby. Someone gasped. Someone else lifted a phone. And in the middle of it all, standing alone on the edge of the priority lane, was Claire Morgan, 36 years old, holding a boarding pass that no one was willing to read. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. Not yet. She just looked at the agent, then at the two uniformed security contractors edging closer, hands hovering near their radios. Her pulse thudded in her ears, slow and controlled. She had learned a long time ago that panic was a luxury for people who felt safe. The terminal smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. The overhead speakers crackled with delayed flight announcements. Somewhere behind her, a man scoffed. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, loud enough to be heard. "Some people will try anything these days." Claire felt that sentence land in her chest like a familiar bruise. 10 minutes earlier, none of this had existed. She had walked into the terminal unnoticed, a grey knit coat hanging loose over a black sweater, hair pulled back without care, canvas tote cutting into her shoulder. No jewelry worth mentioning, no designer luggage. Just a woman moving with the tired efficiency of someone who had slept badly and thought too much. She had followed the signs for gate C27, past the coffee kiosk, nodded once at the TSA officer who waved her through without looking up. Ordinary, invisible, safe. Until she stepped onto the priority lane carpet. The agent's name tag read Linda Fowler, late 50s, perfect lipstick, hair sprayed into obedience. The kind of woman who believed rules existed to protect order, and that she was order. Linda had looked at Claire the way people look at a stain they're deciding whether to scrub or ignore. "This line is for priority boarding only," Linda had said, not unkindly, but not kindly either. Her eyes had flicked to the tote, then to Claire's shoes. Practical, worn. "Main cabin is around the corner. I'm in the right place," Claire had replied. Calm, polite. She had already pulled up the boarding pass on her phone, the screen glowing softly in her palm. Linda hadn't taken it. She had smiled instead, a small, tight smile. "Ma'am, I've been doing this a long time." That was the first warning. Behind Linda, another agent, Tom Alvarez, early 40s, watched the exchange with a frown he didn't bother to hide. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "We're running behind. Let's keep things moving." Claire had met his eyes. There was a question there, not curiosity, calculation. How much trouble would this woman be? "Please scan it," Claire had said, still calm, still reasonable. Linda's smile disappeared. "I don't need to scan it to know when someone's in the wrong lane." A few heads turned. The air shifted. People loved a disruption when it wasn't theirs. Claire felt the familiar tightening behind her ribs. Not anger, not fear. Something colder. Memory. She had been underestimated in conference rooms, in court hallways, in hospital waiting rooms at 3 in the morning. She knew this terrain. She knew how it ended if you let it. "I paid for this seat," she said quietly. "Scan the pass." Linda straightened, the movement sharp. "If you're trying to upgrade yourself, this isn't the way to do it. And you're holding up boarding." That was when Linda waved security over. Now, in the present moment, the two contractors stood close enough that Claire could smell their cologne. Cheap, overconfident. One of them, Evan, early 30s, kept glancing at Linda for cues. The other, Mark, older, eyes tired, looked at Claire's face and then away, as if he didn't want to be part of this, but didn't know how to exit. "What seems to be the issue?" Mark asked. "She's refusing to leave the priority lane," Linda said. Her voice carried. It always did when she wanted witnesses. "And she's becoming disruptive." Claire almost laughed. Almost. "I asked them to scan my ticket," Claire said. "That's all." Evan shifted his weight. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step aside." The word need hung there, heavy. Behind Claire, the murmurs grew louder. A woman whispered something sharp and disapproving. A man cleared his throat dramatically. Tom Alvarez rubbed his temple, already annoyed at the delay. No one offered to look at the boarding pass. No one asked what seat she had. The story had already been written, and it wasn't in her favor. Claire looked down at her phone. The screen had dimmed. She tapped it awake, the light reflecting in her eyes. Seat 1D. She knew it by heart. She had chosen it for the angle of the window, the way the morning light hit just right over the wing. She had chosen it because details mattered. "What happens if I don't move?" she asked. Linda's lips pressed together. "Then we escalate." The word was almost gentle, almost bureaucratic. Claire inhaled slowly through her nose. She felt the weight of the last 48 hours settle on her shoulders. The meeting that ran late, the argument she hadn't won, the decision she had signed off on that would ripple outward in ways most of these people would never see. She thought of her father's voice, years ago, telling her that power wasn't loud, it was patient. She stepped back, just one step. The crowd relaxed, a collective exhale. Order restored. For now. "Thank you," Linda said, satisfied. But Claire didn't turn toward the main cabin line. She turned toward the window at the end of the concourse, where the planes sat like sleeping animals under the grey sky. The movement was small, but it broke the script. Tom noticed. His eyes narrowed. "Ma'am?" Claire walked. Not fast, not slow. Each step measured. The carpet muffled the sound of her shoes. She stopped near the glass, far enough to be out of Linda's immediate reach, but close enough that everyone could still see her. She set her tote down. Her hands were steady. For the first time since this began, Linda looked uncertain. Claire reached into her coat pocket and took out her phone again. Not the boarding pass, not the airline app. She scrolled through contacts most people would never need. Names with weight. Names that didn't explain themselves. She paused on one. Her thumb hovered. Evan scoffed under his breath. "Here we go." Claire didn't look at him. She pressed call. The ring sounded loud in the quiet that had crept over the gate. One ring. Two. Linda crossed her arms. "You need to leave this area. Now." The call connected. Claire didn't speak right away. She watched her reflection in the glass. Tired eyes, straight spine. A woman who had learned how to stand still while storms formed around her. "Hi," she said finally. Her voice was low, controlled. "I'm at Denver, gate C-27. We have a situation." On the other end of the line, someone stopped what they were doing. You could hear it in the silence that followed. Around her, the terminal breathed in. No one knew it yet, but something irreversible had just begun. The voice on the other end of the line didn't ask her to repeat herself. It didn't ask questions at all. It simply said, "Stay where you are," and the call went dead. Claire slipped the phone back into her pocket and stood there, facing the glass, watching a baggage cart crawl along the tarmac like an insect. Her reflection stared back at her, faint and fractured by the seams in the window. Behind her, the gate exhaled again, restless now. People shifted. Someone laughed nervously. Linda Fowler cleared her throat, sharp and impatient, the sound of a woman used to being obeyed. "You can't just stand there," Linda said. "This is an active boarding area." Claire didn't turn around. She felt the words pass through her like air. What she felt instead was the vibration in her chest, the aftershock of that voice on the phone. "Stay where you are." Not a request, a directive. Tom Alvarez leaned toward Linda, lowering his voice, but not enough. We need to move this along. The captain's already asking why we're not boarding. Linda's jaw tightened. She took 2 steps toward Claire, heels clicking with purpose. Ma'am, if you don't leave this area immediately, I will have you escorted out of the terminal. That got a reaction. Phones came up higher now. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Evan straightened, eager, hand hovering near his radio. Mark looked between Linda and Claire, his mouth a thin line. He had the look of a man who knew exactly how this usually ended, and didn't like it. Claire turned around slowly. The movement was deliberate, almost ceremonial. When she faced Linda, her expression wasn't defiant. It wasn't apologetic. It was neutral, in a way that made people uncomfortable, as if she were looking at Linda from a distance Linda couldn't see. "I'm not causing a disturbance," Claire said. Her voice carried without effort. "I'm standing quietly." Linda laughed, short and humorless. "You're refusing a lawful instruction." "What law is that?" Claire asked. The question landed harder than any raised voice could have. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. Her cheeks flushed. "Airport policy," she snapped, "which you are clearly unfamiliar with." A man in a navy blazer stepped forward from the cluster of waiting passengers. Mid-60s, silver hair. The kind of face that expected agreement. "Why don't you just do what they're asking?" he said to Claire. "Some of us have connections to make." Claire looked at him. Really looked. The impatience in his eyes. The assumption that her inconvenience was an obstacle, not an injustice. "So do I," she said. The man scoffed and turned away, shaking his head. Unbelievable. Behind Linda, Tom's radio crackled. He glanced down at it, frowned, then looked up at the gate monitor. The screen flickered once, so quickly it might have been missed. He leaned closer, tapping the edge of the display. "Did you see that?" he muttered. Linda waved him off. "Focus." But Tom didn't. He tapped again. The monitor refreshed, slower this time. The flight information lagged, letters blinking out of sync. A quiet murmur rippled through the line as people noticed the delay. Claire felt it then. Not satisfaction, not relief. A pressure change. Like the air before a storm breaks. Her phone vibrated once in her pocket. A single buzz. She didn't look at it. She didn't need to. Evan lifted his radio. "Control, this is gate C27. We may have an uncooperative passenger." The radio squawked, then went silent. Evan frowned, tapping it. "Control?" Nothing. Mark tried his. Same result. Dead air. Linda's confidence faltered for the first time. "What's going on?" Tom was staring at his screen now. "The system's lagging. I can't pull up the manifest." "That's not possible," Linda said. "Reboot it." "I am," Tom replied, fingers moving faster. "It's not responding." The gate monitor went dark. A collective sound rose from the crowd. A low wave of confusion. People craned their necks. Someone cursed softly. A child asked a question that no one answered. Linda turned sharply toward Claire. Her eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" Claire met her gaze. Nothing. It was the truth, and that was what made it dangerous. Overhead, the announcement chime rang, then cut off mid-tone. The speakers hissed, then fell silent. The terminal felt suddenly too big, too exposed. Every sound echoed louder than it should have. Tom swallowed. "I'm going to call operations." He picked up the desk phone. No dial tone. Linda's breath quickened. This is unacceptable. She took a step back, scanning the concourse as if help might materialize if she looked hard enough. It didn't. What did appear instead was a figure at the far end of the hallway, moving fast enough to draw attention. A man in a charcoal suit, jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened. He was walking with purpose that bordered on panic. Then another beside him, and another. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing hierarchy the way animals sense weather. Phones dipped, then rose again, recording now with urgency. Tom's eyes widened. "Is that?" Linda turned, following his gaze. Her face drained of color. The man in front broke into a jog. He slowed only when he reached the edge of the gate area, chest heaving, eyes scanning, until they landed on Claire. Relief flashed across his face, sharp and unmistakable. "There," he said, voice rough. "There you are." He straightened, smoothing his jacket with shaking hands, then walked toward her, past Linda, past the security contractors, past the stunned passengers. He stopped an arm's length away from Claire and inclined his head, not deeply, but enough that it was visible, enough that it meant something. "I'm sorry it took me this long," he said. "Traffic from the executive lot was a mess." Linda stared at him, mouth slightly open. "Sir, you can't be here," she said automatically, clinging to procedure like a life raft. "This is a restricted—" The man didn't look at her. He didn't acknowledge her existence at all. His attention never left Claire. "Are you all right?" he asked. Claire studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the tension he was trying and failing to hide. She nodded once. "I am now." Behind him, the other men arrived. One of them, broad-shouldered, scanned the area with the security professional's eye. Another pulled out a phone, already typing. The crowd buzzed, energy spiking. Someone whispered a name. Someone else whispered another. No one was sure, but everyone knew this wasn't normal. Linda found her voice. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man finally turned to her. His expression was calm, but there was steel underneath it. The kind that had been forged over years of making decisions other people lived with. "That's not the question you should be asking," he said. He gestured slightly, and the broad-shouldered man stepped forward. "All boarding is suspended," he announced. "Effective immediately." "What?" someone shouted. "You can't do that," Linda said, her voice shrill now. "This flight is cleared. We're on a schedule." The man in the suit looked back at Claire, then at the gate, then at Linda. His gaze lingered on her name tag for a moment longer than necessary. "Not anymore." Linda's hands shook. "This is outrageous." Claire spoke before the man could respond. "Linda," she said gently. Linda flinched at the sound of her name. "You never scanned my ticket," Claire continued. "You never asked who I was. You decided, based on what you saw, that I didn't belong." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. They spread anyway, slipping into the silence and taking hold. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted to Tom, to the security contractors, to the crowd. For the first time, she looked small. The man in the suit stepped closer to Claire. "We'll take it from here," he said quietly. Claire nodded. She felt the weight in her chest shift, not lifting yet, but settling into something steadier. Around her, the terminal held its breath. Somewhere deep in the airport, systems were waking up to commands they couldn't ignore. And standing at gate C-27, under the cold fluorescent lights, Claire Morgan waited, knowing the worst part was still ahead. The silence didn't break all at once. It cracked, slowly, like ice under weight. "What do you mean, suspended?" a woman near the front demanded. "I'm already late." "That's not your decision," Linda snapped, reflexively reaching for the authority she felt slipping. Her voice sounded wrong in the new atmosphere, too sharp, too small. "You can't just shut down a gate because of one passenger." The man in the suit didn't respond to her. He turned slightly, listening as the broad-shouldered security chief murmured something into his ear. A name. A confirmation. The man nodded once. "Linda Fowler," he said at last. The sound of her full name, spoken evenly, without heat, landed harder than shouting ever could. Linda stiffened. "Yes?" "You're relieved of duty," he said, "effective immediately." A murmur surged through the crowd, louder now, no longer curious but electric. Phones rose higher. Someone laughed, sharp and disbelieving. Tom Alvarez took an involuntary step back, his face pale. "You can't do that," Linda said again. But the words were unraveling even as she spoke them. "You don't have the authority." The man finally gave her his full attention. "I do." He reached into his jacket and produced a badge, flashing it briefly. It wasn't an airport credential. It wasn't law enforcement. It was corporate, understated, powerful in the way only internal authority could be. The kind that didn't need to explain itself to the public. Linda stared at it. Her mouth opened, closed. She swallowed. Behind her, Tom's phone buzzed. He looked down, read something, then looked up at Claire with a new expression. Not suspicion, recognition, or something close to fear. "Wait," Linda said, her voice thinning. "This has to be a misunderstanding. She refused to follow instructions. I was doing my job." Claire watched her closely. She saw the shift happening in real time. The moment when certainty collapsed into self-protection. The moment when people stopped asking what was right and started asking what would save them. "Which instructions?" Claire asked quietly. "The ones you made up, or the ones you never bothered to check?" Linda turned on her. "You manipulated this," she said, desperation creeping in. "You caused a system failure. I stood still and made a phone call," Claire replied. "Everything that happened after that was already waiting to happen." The man in the suit stepped between them, subtle but final. "We'll be reviewing the footage," he said. "All of it. Audio, video, logs. Gate activity for the past 18 months. Linda's breath hitched. Just once, almost imperceptibly, but Claire saw it. The security chief spoke again, louder this time. "Ma'am, I need you to step away from the podium." "I've worked here for 20 years, Linda said, her voice breaking through the control she had clung to so fiercely. "I have a perfect record." Tom looked at her then. Really looked. His mouth twitched, as if he wanted to say something and didn't dare. The man in the suit didn't raise his voice. Records reflect what people choose to document. That was when a new figure entered the circle. A woman in her early 40s, navy blazer, hair pulled back tight, eyes sharp. She held a tablet like a weapon. "We pulled the quick audit," she said to the man. "Gate C-27 flagged irregularities, seat assignments overridden, repeatedly." Linda shook her head violently. "No, that's not..." The woman didn't look at her. "Seat 1D, last month, blocked as inoperable, then reassigned manually 5 minutes before boarding." A hush fell. Even the crowd sensed the turn. 2 weeks before that, the woman continued. "Seat 1B, same pattern. Cash compensation logged as customer service recovery. No incident attached." Tom's face drained of color. "Linda," he whispered. Claire felt something cold and heavy settle in her stomach. Not surprise. Confirmation. This was bigger than her. It always was. Linda laughed suddenly, high and brittle. "You're twisting things. Those were judgment calls." "Judgment," Claire echoed softly. Linda rounded on her. "You don't understand how this works. I keep things moving. I protect the airline. You protect what you think you're entitled to," Claire said. "Those aren't the same thing." The woman with the tablet turned it toward the man in the suit. He scanned it, jaw tightening. "Who is Ethan Fowler?" he asked. Linda froze. Tom sucked in a breath. The name hit the air like a dropped glass. "That's my son," Linda said finally. "Why?" the woman answered. "He's on the standby list for this flight." A sound escaped Linda's throat. Not a word. A noise. "He needed to get to New York," she said, the explanation tumbling out now, frantic. "I was just trying to help him." The crowd erupted. Shouts, accusations. Someone yelled, "Are you kidding me?" Phones shook as people tried to capture every angle. Claire closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, the terminal looked different. Smaller. Meaner. She felt the weight of all the times this kind of quiet corruption had hidden behind rules and uniforms. "That's fraud," someone said near the back. The man in the suit nodded. "And nepotism. And falsification of records." Linda's knees buckled. Mark, the older security contractor, moved on instinct, catching her elbow before she fell. His face was grim. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you need to sit down." She wrenched her arm free. "Don't touch me!" Claire stepped forward then. The movement stilled the room. "I want you to understand something," she said. Her voice was steady, but it carried. "You didn't target me because of my seat. You targeted me because you thought I wouldn't fight back. Because you thought no one would listen if I did." Linda looked at her, eyes wild. "You ruined everything." "No," Claire said. "You did. Long before I walked up to that gate." The man in the suit lifted his hand, signaling the security chief. Two uniformed airport police officers had arrived quietly during the exchange, standing just outside the ring. Now they stepped in. "Linda Fowler," one of them said. "You're being detained pending investigation." "This is insane," Linda sobbed. "I made a mistake." Claire watched as the handcuffs came out, metal glinting under fluorescent light. She felt no triumph, only a deep, aching exhaustion. As Linda was led away, the crowd parted, their expressions a mix of satisfaction and unease. The spectacle was over, but the implications were settling in. The man in the suit turned back to Claire. "We can clear the gate now," he said. "Get you on your flight." Claire looked at the dark monitor, the stalled jet bridge, the faces of people who had watched her be dismissed minutes earlier. She thought of the way the man in the navy blazer had told her to just comply. She thought of the silence that had followed. "No," she said. He blinked. "No?" "This gate is compromised," Claire continued, "procedurally and ethically. I'm not boarding from here." A ripple of protest ran through the crowd. "We'll reassign crew," he said quickly. "We'll make it right." Claire shook her head. "Not today." She turned slightly, addressing the waiting passengers. "You were willing to let this happen because it wasn't happening to you. I won't pretend that doesn't matter." The words stung. They were meant to. She looked back at the man. "Cancel the flight." The terminal exploded. "You can't be serious. That's not fair. My ticket." The man hesitated. He looked at her. Really looked, weighing something far heavier than a schedule. Then he nodded. "Done." The announcement came moments later. "Flight cancelled. Please see an agent for rebooking." The anger was immediate, loud, chaotic. Claire stepped back, letting it wash over her. She had expected it. She had chosen it. The man leaned in. "We have a car waiting," he said quietly. "And another aircraft." Claire picked up her tote. "Good," she said. "I have somewhere else to be." As she walked away from gate C-27, the noise faded behind her. Ahead, the corridor opened, quiet and bright. Her phone vibrated again. A message this time. It read simply, "We're ready when you are." Claire didn't reply. She didn't need to. She kept walking, knowing that what she had started here wouldn't end with one gate, one flight, or one name. It never did. The car, waiting outside the secure exit, was black, unmarked, its engine already running. The driver didn't ask for her name. He didn't ask where she was going. He simply opened the door and stepped back. Claire slid into the back seat, the leather cool against her palms, and for the first time since she had entered the terminal, the noise fell away completely. The door shut with a heavy, final sound. Inside the car, the city blurred past the tinted windows. Denver looked calm from this angle, orderly, unaware. Claire rested her head back and closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to think. Her phone lay face down in her lap, vibrating intermittently with messages she wasn't ready to read. Each vibration was a reminder that the moment at the gate had already escaped her control. It was bigger now. It belonged to systems, to people whose job it was to decide what happened next. The man in the suit sat across from her, knees angled toward the door, posture rigid. His name was Robert Langford, though most people didn't use it when speaking to him. He had spent 2 decades learning how to move power quietly, how to shut doors without slamming them. Today had rattled him more than he wanted to admit. "I should have been there sooner," he said. Claire opened her eyes. "You were there when it mattered." "That's not the same thing," he replied. He ran a hand over his face, a crack in the composed exterior. "The optics are already spiraling. Social feeds picked it up before we even locked the gate." "Good," Claire said. Robert studied her. "You planned that." "I planned for resistance," she corrected. "I didn't plan for them to be careless." The car slowed, turning into a private access road bordered by low concrete barriers. Ahead, past a security checkpoint, the silhouette of a smaller aircraft waited, lights glowing softly against the grey sky. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant to be seen. Robert followed her gaze. "We can have you airborne in 15 minutes. Claire nodded once. "That's enough." The car stopped. The driver opened the door. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. Claire stepped out, the wind tugging at her coat. And for a brief moment, she felt the familiar pull of doubt. Not about what she had done, about what it would cost. She pushed the thought aside. Cost was part of the equation. It always had been. Inside the small terminal, a woman waited near the entrance, tablet tucked under her arm. Early 40s, efficient. Her name was Megan Shaw, and she wasted no time. "The preliminary findings are already triggering mandatory reports," Megan said as she fell into step beside Claire. "We're uncovering patterns beyond that gate. Other airports, similar override behaviors." Claire didn't slow. "How far back?" "Minimum 3 years," Megan replied. "Possibly longer. We're pulling archived logs." Robert exhaled sharply. "This is going to be ugly." Claire stopped walking. Megan and Robert halted with her. "Ugly is when this keeps happening and no one names it," Claire said. Her voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge now, a sharpened resolve. What happened at that gate wasn't an anomaly. It was a symptom. Megan nodded. "We're prepared to act." "Then act," Claire said. They boarded quickly. No ceremony, no announcements. The cabin was quiet, almost reverent. Claire took a seat by the window, setting her tote at her feet. As the door closed and the engines spooled up, she finally picked up her phone. The messages were already there. Missed calls, alerts. A video thumbnail froze her thumb mid-motion. It showed the gate. Linda's face caught mid-sneer. Claire standing still, framed against the glass. She didn't watch it. Instead, she opened her email. At the top sat a message marked urgent, sent less than 5 minutes ago. The subject line was short. "We need to talk." She opened it. The sender was Harold Bennett, chairman of the board. The plane taxied. The vibration traveled through the seat into her spine. Claire stared at the screen, reading the message once, then again. Harold was a careful man. He didn't ask for conversations unless he already knew where he stood. That meant the board had moved faster than expected. Good. The plane lifted smoothly, the ground dropping away in a controlled arc. Claire watched the airport shrink, the terminal becoming a grid of light and shadow. Somewhere down there, gate C-27 was quiet now. Cleared. Reset. But the echo of it would linger. Robert unbuckled across from her, leaning forward. The board wants to convene tonight. Claire didn't look away from the window. They will. They're nervous, he added. About exposure. Liability. They should be nervous about culture, Claire said. Liability follows. Megan glanced between them. Media's framing it as a power reversal, she said. They don't know the half of it yet. Claire finally turned. They don't need to. This isn't about me. Robert smiled thinly. It never is with you. The plane leveled off. The hum settled into a steady rhythm. Claire felt her breathing sync with it, the tension in her shoulders easing just enough to think clearly again. She opened a new document on her phone. No title, just a blank page. She began typing, fingers moving with practiced certainty. Points, names, directives. This wasn't reaction. This was correction. Across the aisle, Megan watched, recognizing the shift. What are you drafting? A mandate, Claire replied. Immediate suspension of discretionary override authority at all domestic gates. Independent review panels. External audits. Robert raised an eyebrow. You're going to tear the whole thing apart. Claire didn't stop typing. I'm going to rebuild it. Silence filled the cabin again, but it was a different kind now. Focused. Intentional. Her phone buzzed once more. A text this time. Unknown number. You didn't have to do all that. Claire stared at it. She knew who it was from without asking. She typed back 3 words. Yes, I did. She sent it and set the phone down, turning her attention back to the document. Outside, clouds rolled beneath the wing, thick and white, hiding the ground completely. For years, Claire had learned to navigate spaces that weren't built for her. She had learned restraint, timing, precision. But restraint was not silence, and precision was not mercy. What happened at that gate had stripped the veneer off something rotten. She had simply refused to look away. The plane surged forward, cutting through cloud into open sky. Claire kept typing, each line a step towards something irreversible. She didn't know yet how many people would fight it, how many would pretend they hadn't seen the same patterns she had. She only knew that the moment had passed where doing nothing was an option. And somewhere below, in offices and boardrooms and break rooms, people were about to learn that the quiet woman at the gate had never been small. She had just been patient. The boardroom lights were dimmed when Claire walked in, the city outside the glass walls already slipping into night. Denver's skyline glowed in clean lines and quiet confidence, a view designed to reassure people who believed order was permanent. 12 seats ringed the table. 11 were occupied. The 12th waited for her. No one spoke as she took it. Harold Bennett sat at the head, hands folded, chin lowered. 70 years old, impeccable posture. He had survived 3 mergers, 2 hostile takeovers, and a public scandal that never quite made the news. He had built his authority on calm and continuity. Tonight, his calm felt rehearsed. "Thank you for coming on short notice," he said. Claire didn't respond. She set her tote beneath the table and placed her phone face down in front of her. The small action carried weight. Eyes tracked it. People understood symbols, even when they pretended not to. Across from her sat Elaine Porter, General Counsel, mid-50s, eyes sharp behind thin frames. To Elaine's right, Michael Reed, Operations, leaned back with his arms crossed, jaw tight. 2 seats down, Samuel Ortiz, Finance, thumbed the edge of a legal pad he hadn't written on. Harold cleared his throat. The incident at Gate C-27 has escalated beyond what any of us anticipated. It escalated because it was allowed to, Claire said. The words landed cleanly. No apology, no preamble. Michael shifted. With respect, Claire, you bypassed internal channels. I used them, she replied. They failed. Elaine leaned forward. We need to talk about exposure. There are federal implications now. There were federal implications before, Claire said. They were just invisible to you. A beat. The room tightened. Harold raised a hand, a practiced motion. Let's be precise. The question in front of us is scope. How far does this go? Claire met his gaze. As far as it needs to. Silence stretched. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Samuel spoke next, voice measured. We've seen preliminary numbers. If we suspend discretionary overrides nationwide, we're looking at delays, cancellations, revenue impact. How much? Claire asked. Samuel hesitated. In the short term, tens of millions. And in the long term? She asked. He didn't answer. Claire turned to Elaine. What's the cost of a class action? Elaine's lips pressed together. Potentially catastrophic. Claire nodded. So we agree the current system is the risk. Michael scoffed softly. You're assuming this is systemic. Claire leaned forward, forearms on the table. I'm asserting it. We have years of data showing discretionary authority clustered around the same outcomes. Same passengers inconvenienced, same agents empowered, same patterns of silence. Harold studied her. And your solution? Claire didn't look down at her phone. She didn't need notes. Immediate suspension of all discretionary gate-level overrides. Third-party audit firm with full access to logs. Whistleblower protections for staff. Mandatory retraining with external oversight. Michael shook his head. You're talking about ripping out the backbone of operations. I'm talking about removing rot, Claire said. Backbones don't lie. Elaine exhaled slowly. Public perception will frame this as an admission of guilt. Public perception already has footage, Claire replied. We can either respond with denial or with change. Daniel glanced at Harold. She's not wrong. Harold closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something had shifted. What else? Claire's voice dropped. We terminate seniority-based immunity. Tenure cannot be a shield. Michael straightened. You can't mean that. I do, she said. Longevity without accountability is how this survives. A murmur rippled. Not agreement. Recognition. Elaine tilted her head. And enforcement? Claire finally turned her phone over, waking the screen. She tapped once. A document projected onto the wall behind Harold. Names, dates, gate codes, patterns highlighted in red. This, Claire said, is a starting point. Harold stood abruptly, chair scraping. He walked to the screen, reading. The room followed him with their eyes. No one interrupted. How did you get this? He asked quietly. I asked the right questions, Claire said, and I listened when people answered. Michael swallowed. That list includes regional directors. Yes, Claire said. And it's incomplete. Elaine's voice was careful now. You understand what you're asking us to do? I understand what I'm asking you to stop doing, Claire replied. The room fell still again. Time stretched. Decisions coalesced. Harold turned back to the table. He didn't sit. If we proceed, there will be resistance. Claire met his gaze. There already is. He nodded once. Then we proceed. Michael's mouth opened, then closed. Samuel lowered his pen. Elaine exhaled, long and resigned. Harold returned to his seat. We'll vote. The vote was quick. Not unanimous. It didn't need to be. When it was done, Harold looked at Claire. You've changed the company tonight. No, she said. I've given it a chance to change itself. The meeting adjourned without ceremony. Chairs slid back. People gathered papers they hadn't used. Outside, the city continued, indifferent. Claire remained seated as the room emptied. Elaine paused at the door. You're going to make enemies. Claire nodded. I already had them. Elaine hesitated. If you need counsel. I'll call, Claire said. The door closed. Silence returned. Claire picked up her phone. New messages waited. Headlines, opinions. The story had split into factions already. She ignored them all. A single email sat unread at the bottom of the list, from an internal address. Subject line, Thank you. She opened it. It was short, anonymous. Someone who had watched Linda fall and felt seen for the first time in years. Claire closed her eyes. The weight in her chest shifted again. Not lighter. Truer. She stood and walked to the window. The city lights reflected back at her, layered over her own face. She looked older than she had that morning. Sharper, less willing to smooth edges. Her phone buzzed. Robert's name lit the screen. It's done, he said when she answered. Not yet, Claire replied, but it started. Outside, a plane lifted into the night, its lights blinking steadily as it climbed. Claire watched until it vanished into the dark and turned away from the glass. She gathered her things and headed for the door, knowing that tomorrow would be louder, harder, and full of people insisting she had gone too far. She also knew this. Silence had never protected anyone worth protecting, and she was done waiting at gates. The morning came without mercy. By 6 a.m., Claire's phone was already warm in her hand, vibrating with messages that stacked faster than she could read them. Overnight, the story had metastasized. Clips trimmed to outrage, headlines sharpened into accusations. Commentators who had never worked a gate or stood in a terminal with cameras pointed at their face now spoke with absolute certainty about what should have happened and who should pay for it. Claire sat at the small kitchen table of the hotel suite, untouched coffee cooling inches from her fingers. Outside, the city woke up slowly, unaware that a quiet war had already begun inside conference rooms and inboxes. The first call came from legal. We have 3 injunction threats, Elaine said without preamble. Her voice was steady, but there was strain underneath. 2 unions, 1 regional director threatening wrongful termination claims preemptively. Let them file, Claire said. A pause. You're sure? Yes. Another pause. Longer this time. All right, Elaine said. Then we move fast. The call ended. The phone rang again immediately. This time it was operations. Michael Reed sounded like he hadn't slept. We have gates offline in Chicago, Atlanta, Phoenix. Supervisors are refusing to suspend discretionary authority. Then suspend the supervisors, Claire said. That will cause delays. It already has. You're pushing the system past tolerance, Michael warned. Claire looked out the window, watching traffic begin to crawl. No, she said. I'm revealing where it was already broken. She ended the call, before he could respond. By 7:30, the first internal memo leaked. By 8, a senator tweeted. By 9, the phrase hostile restructuring appeared on 3 major networks. Claire stood in the elevator, descending toward the lobby, her reflection fractured by brushed steel walls. She looked composed. She felt none of it. Under the surface, something heavier had taken root. A certainty that this was no longer about policy. It was about control. And control did not yield quietly. The car took her to a low concrete building near the edge of the city. No signage, no logo, just glass, security, and silence. Inside, the operations floor hummed with restrained urgency. Screens glowed. People spoke in clipped tones. No one laughed. Megan Shaw met her at the door. "We're seeing coordinated pushback," she said as they walked. "Same language across regions, same talking points." "Who's feeding it?" Claire asked. Megan hesitated. "We think it's coming from the upper middle, people who thought they were untouchable." Claire nodded. "They always do." They stopped in front of a glass-walled conference room. Inside, Robert Langford waited, sleeves rolled up, tie gone, phone pressed to his ear. He ended the call when he saw her. "They're circling," he said, "trying to force a compromise." "On what?" Claire asked. "On optics, on timing, on accountability thresholds." Claire stepped past him into the room. "There's no compromise on accountability." Robert closed the door. "You're making enemies faster than allies." "I don't need allies," Claire said. "I need compliance." He studied her for a moment. "You're different today." She met his gaze. "I was different yesterday. People just hadn't noticed yet." A junior analyst entered, pale and breathless. "We found something," he said. "It's not just gate overrides." Claire turned. "Go on." The analyst swallowed. "There's a parallel system." Manual fee adjustments routed through customer recovery codes. Luggage, seating, priority access. Megan stiffened. "That's controlled centrally." "Yes," he said, "but it's being exploited locally. The same names keep appearing." Claire felt a familiar tightening behind her eyes. Not shock. Confirmation again. "Show me," she said. The screens changed. Charts, names, timestamps. Patterns too consistent to dismiss. Robert leaned forward. "If this gets out..." "It will," Claire said. "When?" "When we release it," she replied. Robert straightened. "You're going to detonate the whole structure." Claire looked at the data. It was already hollow. Her phone buzzed again. This time she recognized the number. She let it ring twice before answering. "Claire," Harold Bennett said. He sounded tired, older than he had last night. "We need to slow this down." "No," she said. A beat. "You're forcing the board's hand." "I'm forcing the truth into daylight." "You're isolating yourself." "I've been isolated before," Claire replied. "This isn't new." Silence stretched across the line. "There are donors," Harold said carefully. "Political interests." Claire closed her eyes. "If we flinch now, we deserve what happens next." Another pause. "You're asking me to choose." "I'm asking you to lead," Claire said. The line went dead. The room felt tighter after that, the air heavier. Robert rubbed his temples. "You realize what happens if he doesn't back you?" Claire nodded. "Then the system proves my point." A commotion rose outside the glass. Voices. Movement. Someone raised their tone, sharp with anger. Megan glanced toward the door. "What's that?" Before anyone could answer, the door opened. A man stepped in without waiting to be invited. late 40s, expensive suit worn like armor. His smile was practiced, thin. "Claire Morgan," he said. "We finally meet." Robert stiffened. "You're not authorized to be here." The man waved him off. "Save it." Claire studied him. She knew the type. Regional executive, power broker, someone who had thrived in grey areas and called it experience. "You've caused a lot of disruption," he continued. "People are upset. People who benefited from silence usually are," Claire replied. He smiled wider. "You think you're cleaning house. What you're actually doing is destabilizing an industry." "An industry built on public trust," Claire said. "That trust was already compromised." He leaned closer. "You don't have the backing you think you do." Claire didn't move. "I don't need permission." His smile vanished. "You're one person." She met his eyes. So was the woman at the gate. Something flickered across his face. Annoyance, uncertainty. "You should reconsider," he said. "For your own sake." Claire stood. The movement was unhurried, but it shifted the room. "If you're here to threaten me," she said quietly, "you've miscalculated." He scoffed. "You don't scare me." "I know," Claire said. "That's why this will work." She stepped past him, opening the door. The analyst flinched out of the way. The man turned, anger sharpening his features. "This isn't over," he said. Claire paused, hand on the doorframe. "It never is." She walked out. The operations floor fell silent as she crossed it. People looked up from their screens, some with fear, some with something closer to hope. By noon, the board reconvened. By 1, the first resignations hit the wire. By 2, federal agencies requested access. Claire watched it unfold from a quiet office, her phone finally still. She knew what would come next. The backlash would peak. The threats would sharpen. The pressure would turn personal. She also knew this. Once a system is exposed, it never returns to its original shape. Outside, clouds thickened over the city, a storm building. Claire stood by the window, hands resting lightly on the glass. She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She waited, because the final reckoning was still ahead. The subpoena arrived just after noon, hand-delivered, its weight more symbolic than physical. Claire watched as the courier set it on the reception desk and left without meeting her eyes. The paper sat there, crisp and official, an acknowledgement that the storm she had been steering toward had finally made landfall. She didn't open it right away. Around her, the building had taken on a different rhythm. Conversations dropped to murmurs when she passed. People straightened unconsciously, then relaxed when she nodded. Fear and relief lived side by side now, indistinguishable in the air. This was what transition felt like, when it wasn't polished for press releases. Robert Langford caught up to her in the hallway. "Federal Oversight Committee," he said quietly. "Transportation and Commerce." "Good," Claire replied. "They're late." He studied her profile as they walked. "You're not worried?" "I'm prepared," she said. "There's a difference." They entered a smaller conference room, glass walls frosted just enough to blur the figures outside. Megan Shaw was already there, laptop open, eyes sharp. She slid the subpoena across the table. "They want testimony within 72 hours, Megan said. "Public session." Claire picked it up, scanning the text. "They want theater." "They'll get it," Robert said. Claire set the paper down. "No," she corrected. "They'll get facts." Megan leaned back. "We've identified the core group pushing back hardest. 8 regional directors, 4 former board consultants, 2 union reps quietly aligned with management." Claire nodded. "Names?" Megan listed them without hesitation. Claire listened, committing each one to memory, not out of spite, out of necessity. Power thrived on anonymity, She intended to remove it. Her phone buzzed again. A private number. She let it ring. It buzzed again, then stopped. A message followed. "We need to talk before you make this worse." Claire stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted the message. She looked up. "Set up a data room for the committee," she said. "Full access. No redactions." Robert's eyebrows lifted. "That's unprecedented." "So is what we're uncovering." The first leak from inside the resistance came an hour later. An email chain. Careless, arrogant, language that assumed protection would last forever. It spread fast, faster than anyone could contain it. By mid-afternoon, the narrative shifted again. This time, not toward outrage, but toward reckoning. Claire sat alone in her office as the sun dipped behind the skyline. The city's reflection layered itself over her own in the glass. She thought of the gate, of Linda's certainty, of how easily authority had mistaken itself for truth. A knock came at the door. Soft, hesitant. "Come in," Claire said. Mark, the older security contractor from the gate, stepped inside. He looked out of place in the clean lines of the office, his posture stiff, hands clasped in front of him. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. Claire gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." He did, carefully. "I wanted to say thank you." She studied him. "For what?" "For not letting it slide," he said. His voice was rough. "I've seen things like that happen. I told myself it wasn't my job to interfere." Claire held his gaze. "It is now." He nodded slowly. "I filed a statement, with everything I saw, and things before that." "Good," she said. He hesitated. "They might come after me." "They will," Claire said honestly. "But they won't win." Mark swallowed. "That's enough for me." When he left, Claire sat back, letting the silence return. Her phone lit up again. This time she answered. "You're burning bridges," the voice on the other end said. Familiar, controlled, dangerous in its calm. "I'm illuminating them," Claire replied. "You think you're untouchable now." "I think accountability shouldn't be selective," she said. A soft laugh. "You're idealistic." "I'm precise," Claire corrected. The line went dead. By evening, the resignations had turned into firings. Statements were issued, apologies crafted. None of them reached Claire. She didn't read them. Instead, she prepared. The hearing room was larger than she expected, wood-paneled and cold. Flags stood at attention behind the raised dais. Cameras lined the back wall. Claire took her seat without expression, hands folded loosely in front of her. The chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. Morgan, do you swear to tell the truth?" "I do," Claire said. The questions came sharp and fast, about authority, about process, about intent. She answered each one calmly, thoroughly, never raising her voice, never hedging. When they tried to corner her, she widened the frame. When they accused, she redirected to evidence. At one point, a representative leaned forward. "Do you believe your actions were justified?" Claire met his gaze. "I believe ignoring them would have been indefensible." A murmur rippled through the room. Another question. "Do you see yourself as a reformer?" "I see myself as responsible," she said, "for what I know, and for what I refuse to ignore." The hearing stretched on. Hours passed. Outside, night fell again. When it was over, the cameras followed her out, questions shouted, lights flashing. She didn't stop. She didn't run. Back in the quiet of the building, Megan handed her a summary. "They're recommending formal oversight," she said. "Immediate." Claire nodded. "Good." Robert leaned against the wall, exhaustion etched into his face. You realize you've changed the balance permanently. Claire looked at him. That was always the point. Her phone buzzed one last time that night. A message from an unknown number. I saw what you did. I'm ready to talk. Claire stared at the words, then typed a single response. So am I. She set the phone down and turned off the light. Outside, the city breathed, unaware that something fundamental had shifted. The gate was no longer just a place you passed through. It had become a line, and Claire Morgan had crossed it. The meeting took place in a borrowed office after midnight, the kind of neutral space designed so no one felt ownership. Fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. The building's HVAC clicked on and off like a nervous habit. Claire arrived alone. The man waiting for her stood when she entered. Early 40s, lean, expensive suit worn carefully, not confidently. His name, he said, was Daniel Price, former compliance director, recently resigned. The word former clung to him like a wound. You shouldn't be here, he said. Neither should you, Claire replied. She didn't offer a handshake. She took the chair opposite him and waited. Daniel exhaled. I watched the hearing. You didn't blink. Blinking doesn't change facts, Claire said. He nodded, rubbing his palms together. I thought if I kept my head down it would pass, that someone else would fix it. Claire's eyes didn't soften. It never does. He slid a flash drive across the table. It stopped inches from her hand. This isn't part of the audits you've seen. Claire didn't touch it yet. Then what is it? A parallel reporting chain, Daniel said. Off the books. Cleaned before it ever hit formal logs. Cleaned by whom? By people whose names you won't expect, he said. And people you already know. Claire picked up the drive. Its weight was nothing. Its implication was not. Why now? She asked. Daniel laughed once, bitter. Because you broke the illusion. And because if I don't do this now, I'm complicit. Were you? Claire asked. Yes, he said immediately. I signed off. I rationalized. I told myself it was containment. Claire studied him. The tremor in his jaw, the fear trying to pass for courage. Containment of what? Of damage, Daniel said. Reputation. Political relationships. Contracts that couldn't survive sunlight. The word sunlight lingered. Claire stood. Send me the access keys, then leave. Daniel blinked. That's it? That's all I need, she said. He hesitated, then nodded. As he passed her, he paused. They'll come for you harder now. They already have, Claire replied. By the time she reached the car, her phone was lighting up again. Alerts, mentions. The drive sat in her coat pocket like a live wire. She didn't go home. She went back to the building. Megan was still there, hair pulled back tighter than before, eyes rimmed with fatigue. Robert paced near the window, phone pressed to his ear. He looked up when Claire entered and ended the call. We have a problem, he said. Claire set the drive on the table. We have clarity. Megan plugged it in. The room filled with the low whir of processing. Files populated the screen. Folders within folders. Names encoded. Transactions disguised as maintenance adjustments. Entire narratives rewritten to protect the same small circle. Megan's face went still. This is bigger. Yes, Claire said, and cleaner than I expected. Robert leaned over her shoulder. That's not a good thing. No, Claire agreed. It means it was intentional. They worked in silence. Hours passed unnoticed. Outside, the city slept. At 3 a.m, Megan stopped scrolling. There, she said. Look at this. A sequence of approvals, a pattern of denials, a list of incidents quietly neutralized before they reached any external body. Robert swore under his breath. This implicates procurement. And compliance, Megan added. And legal, Robert finished. Claire felt the weight of it settle fully now. Not the scale, the inevitability. Prepare a release, she said. Robert looked up sharply. Now? Yes. Megan hesitated. Once this is public, it can't be put back, Claire said. That will collapse trust. It will reset it, Claire replied. There's a difference. Robert rubbed his face. The board will try to stop this. They won't, Claire said. They'll try to negotiate. And you won't, Megan said. Claire didn't answer. She was already drafting. The release went live at dawn. By 7 a.m., the phones were screaming. By 8, 2 senior executives had stepped down. By 9, federal agents arrived with warrants. Claire stood in the corridor as they passed her, faces neutral, movements precise. She didn't interfere. She didn't watch. She went to the window instead. Below, traffic thickened. Life continued, unaware of how close it had come to staying exactly the same. Her phone buzzed. A message from Harold Bennett. You forced a vote. Claire typed back one line. Then let it count. The vote happened by noon. Emergency session. No press, no delay. Robert returned from the room, pale. They split, he said. Barely. And? Claire asked. They removed discretionary authority entirely. Permanently. Megan exhaled. That's historic. Robert looked at Claire. They also want you to step back. Temporarily. Claire nodded once. That's reasonable. Robert blinked. You're not fighting it? No, she said. I don't need the title. What about influence? He asked. Claire met his eyes. I've already changed the rules. News broke an hour later. Oversight, arrests pending. A timeline of failures mapped out in public view. The narrative shifted again, not toward heroism, toward responsibility. Claire watched it happen from a quiet office with no name on the door. In the afternoon, Mark returned, this time with 2 others, a young gate agent, a dispatcher, people who had stayed quiet until now. They spoke softly, quickly, with relief. Claire listened. When they left, Megan closed the door and leaned against it. They're coming out of everywhere. They were always there, Claire said. Her phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. They're trying to trace the leak. Claire typed back. They'll find the truth instead. Outside, clouds gathered again, heavy with rain. By evening, the first indictments were announced. Claire packed her tote slowly, deliberately. Robert watched her. Where are you going? To the airport, she said. He frowned. You don't need to fly tonight. I do, Claire replied. I need to see it. The terminal was quieter than last time. New signage, new procedures. No red carpet, no discretion. She stood in line like everyone else. When she reached the scanner, the agent smiled. Tired, genuine. Boarding pass, please. Claire held up her phone. The scanner beeped green. The agent didn't look at her clothes, didn't hesitate, just nodded. Have a good flight. Claire walked down the jet bridge, the sound of her footsteps steady and unremarkable. That was the point. Somewhere behind her, systems recalibrated, people adjusted, power moved. Claire took her seat and looked out the window as the plane pushed back from the gate. The runway stretched ahead, clear, and for the first time since Denver, she allowed herself to breathe. The verdict didn't arrive with drama. It came quietly, folded into a press release issued at 11:20 in the morning, written in language so careful it almost disguised the magnitude of what it confirmed. Claire read it on her phone, while standing near a coffee stand in the terminal, the smell of burnt espresso thick in the air. Federal indictments, multiple counts, wire fraud, abuse of authority, obstruction. Names she recognized, names she didn't. The system, exposed long enough, had begun to eat its own. She slipped the phone back into her coat pocket and stepped aside as a family passed, arguing softly about seats. Life moving forward, unaware of how close it had come to staying exactly the same. Her flight was delayed, not because of weather, because of process. She sat, waited, watched. 2 gates down, a supervisor leaned over a podium, guiding a young agent through a checklist. No raised voices. No shortcuts. The agent nodded, nervous but careful, scanning each pass twice before waving passengers through. Slower. Cleaner. Claire felt something shift in her chest. Not pride. Recognition. Her phone buzzed again. Megan. They've scheduled the sentencing hearings. Media's requesting statements. Claire typed back. No statement. A pause, then another message. They'll speculate. Let them. She looked up as boarding resumed. The line moved forward in small increments. People complained less than usual, or maybe she was imagining it. She thought of Linda, not with satisfaction, with clarity. Power hadn't corrupted her. It had revealed her. And the system had rewarded that revelation for years. Until it didn't. On the plane, Claire took a window seat near the front, not first class, not economy, something in between. The seat was narrow, the legroom acceptable. The overhead bin resisted before giving way. She didn't mind. As the cabin filled, she felt eyes on her, then away again. Recognition without certainty. She had become something people sensed rather than named. The plane pushed back, engines roared. The city slid away beneath them. At altitude, Claire opened her laptop, not to work, to read. The coverage was sprawling now. Investigative pieces, timelines, interviews with former employees who spoke in careful tones about fear, about pressure, about what happened when you learned not to ask questions. Some of them defended the system. Some condemned it. Most admitted they had survived it. Claire read until the words blurred. She closed the laptop and rested her head against the seat, eyes open. She wasn't tired. She was braced. The backlash came in waves. By the time they landed, her phone held messages from donors withdrawing support, from political intermediaries distancing themselves, from industry figures offering private congratulations they would never make public. Power rearranging itself in real time. She ignored them all. In the terminal, she moved with the crowd, unescorted, unannounced. At baggage claim, a man recognized her and hesitated, then nodded once, respectful but uncertain. She nodded back. Outside, the air was thick with humidity. New York in late summer. The city pressed in close, loud and alive. A car waited, but she waved it off and walked instead. The noise grounded her. Horns, footsteps, snatches of conversation. She passed a newsstand. Her face stared back from a magazine cover she hadn't agreed to. The headline framed her as a disruptor, a reformer, a threat. She kept walking. That night, she slept for 4 hours. The next morning, the call came. "Claire," Harold Bennett said. He sounded different now, smaller. "The board has finalized the separation." She listened. "They've accepted your terms," he continued. "Full independence for the oversight body. External governance. No internal veto." "Good," she said. "They want you to chair it." Claire was silent for a moment. "No." Harold exhaled. "You're sure?" "Yes. Why?" "Because reform can't depend on one person," she said. It has to survive them. Another pause. Then what will you do? Claire looked out the window at the city moving below her, relentless and alive. I'll watch. When the call ended, she sat for a long time without moving. By afternoon, the sentencing dates were public. Linda's name appeared again, stripped of context, reduced to charges. Her son had taken a plea, cooperated. The story closed around them like a door. Claire felt no relief. She met Robert later that day in a quiet restaurant near the river. He looked older, lighter. They're still angry, he said over untouched food. Some of them. They should be, Claire replied. Anger is honest. You could have been anything after this, he said. You chose restraint. I chose sustainability, she said. He smiled faintly. You're going to disappear. No, Claire said. I'm going to decentralize. The weeks that followed were quieter. Not calm, quieter. Oversight bodies formed, policies hardened, training changed. Some people left, others stayed and adapted. The system learned, slowly, awkwardly, like something relearning how to walk. Claire moved through it without title, without office, without protection beyond what transparency offered. She spoke when asked. She refused when necessary. At an airport in Ohio, she watched an agent stop a supervisor from overriding a boarding order. At another in California, she saw a complaint logged and addressed within minutes instead of buried. Small things, structural things. One evening, months later, she stood again in a terminal, waiting for a delayed flight. The gate was crowded, tempers frayed. A woman argued softly with an agent about a seat assignment. The agent listened, checked the screen, explained, offered options. The woman sighed, frustrated, but heard. Claire smiled, just slightly. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It's different now. Thank you. Claire typed back. Keep it that way. She boarded when called, found her seat, stowed her bag. As the plane lifted, she looked out at the runway lights, streaking past, then disappearing into dark. Power, she knew now, wasn't something you seized. It was something you redistributed. And the real test wasn't whether a system could be broken. It was whether it could be rebuilt without you standing in the doorway. The airport in Portland smelled like rain and old carpet, the kind of place that never pretended to be glamorous and never apologized for it. Claire stood near the window, watching droplets streak down the glass as a regional jet taxied into position. No cameras, no security detail. Just another traveler waiting to go home. She had chosen this flight deliberately. Small airport, late hour, no press, no board members calling her name in hushed tones. She wanted to feel the system the way most people did, stripped of context and protection. Boarding began late. A soft groan rippled through the waiting area, then faded. The gate agent, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes and a steady voice, apologized once and got back to work. No theatrics, no excuses. Claire watched her hands, calm, precise. The scanner beeped green and red with equal indifference. Rules applied. That was the point. A man near the back muttered something sharp under his breath. The agent looked up, met his eyes, and waited. She didn't flinch. She didn't rush. She explained the delay again, clearly, without condescension. The man exhaled, shoulders dropping, and nodded. It wasn't satisfaction. It was acceptance. Claire felt something settle inside her. Not triumph. Alignment. When her turn came, the agent glanced at the screen, then at Claire, then back at the screen. For half a second, recognition flickered. Not of status, of memory. Of a name that had crossed desks and screens in training sessions and policy briefings. The agent straightened, then stopped herself. She smiled instead. Professional, even. "You're all set," she said. Claire nodded. "Thank you." The jet bridge hummed beneath her feet as she walked. The plane was half full. No first class. No curtain dividing worth. She took her seat and stowed her bag, feeling the quiet satisfaction of being exactly where she belonged. As the door closed, she thought back to Denver, to the glass, to the raised voices, to the moment where standing still had become an act of defiance. She hadn't known then how far it would go. She only knew she couldn't move. Now, months later, the echoes were everywhere. In policies rewritten, in training rooms where uncomfortable conversations finally happened, in systems that no longer asked one person to decide who mattered. The engines roared to life. The plane began to move. Claire rested her head against the seat and closed her eyes, not to escape, but to remember. Faces came to her. Mark, standing straighter than he ever had. Megan, relentless and exhausted. And Wright. Robert, finally letting go of the idea that control was safety. Even Linda, frozen in that moment when certainty collapsed. Not as a villain, as a warning. The plane lifted, smooth and unremarkable. That mattered too. At cruising altitude, the cabin lights dimmed. People settled into the familiar rituals of flight, reading, sleeping, staring into nothing. Claire opened her phone and scrolled, not through news, but through messages she had saved and never answered publicly. Short notes, quiet thank yous, stories from people who had stood at other gates, in other rooms, in other lines, and felt seen for the first time. She didn't respond to all of them. She didn't need to. Change didn't require acknowledgement. It required consistency. Outside the window, clouds stretched like an unbroken field. Somewhere beyond them, cities moved. People argued. Systems strained and adapted. None of it needed her immediate attention anymore. That was the real victory. When the plane descended, Claire opened her eyes again. Lights scattered below, constellations of human movement. The runway came into view, steady and clear. They landed without incident. At the gate, passengers stood, impatient but contained. The door opened. The jet bridge locked into place with a dull, mechanical thud. One by one, people stepped forward and disappeared into the terminal. Claire waited until the aisle cleared, then stood and followed. No one stopped her. No one stared. That anonymity felt earned. In the terminal, she passed a poster taped to a wall near the restrooms. New training initiative. Clear language, simple rules. Treat every passenger as legitimate until proven otherwise. No exceptions, no discretion. She paused for a moment, reading it through. Then she kept walking. Outside, the air was cool. Night had settled in fully. Claire pulled her coat tighter and headed toward the exit, blending into the flow of people who would never know her name and never need to. That was how systems were supposed to work. Quietly. Fairly. Without requiring someone to stand in front of them and refuse to move. As she stepped into the night, the noise of the terminal fading behind her, Claire allowed herself one final thought. Power didn't belong to those who guarded gates. It belonged to those who made sure gates didn't need guarding at all. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to like it, subscribe for more stories like this, and share your thoughts in the comments with 3 words that capture what it meant to you.